Hello and welcome to Tech Deals Game Performance Review Time, World of Tanks. We are testing World of Tanks today on 3 different laptop computers at 3 different price points. The HP 14-inch notebook computer for $200, the Acer Aspire E15 15.6-inch laptop computer for $350, and the Acer Aspire E15 15.6-inch laptop computer for $550. I have previously reviewed each of these computers, and full details on those computers will be linked in the video description below. Go check out the individual reviews if you'd like to see more. The only thing I'll directly address is the CPUs and the graphics chips, which you can see on the screen right now. This video is not meant to be an apples to apples comparison. These machines are not configured to be identical. Instead, we're comparing price points. What do you get for the money? For practical purposes, because both of the Acer laptops have been upgraded in the RAM department, what we're really looking at is $200 versus $400 versus $600, because that's really the end cost of the machines with the upgraded RAM. The HP is stock configuration and the other two have had the RAM upgraded. How much performance do you get? Is it worth stepping up from $200 to $400 to $600 if you want to play games such as World of Tanks? We are playing today at 1080p full HD resolution. Various detail settings will be used. I'll address that as we go. And at the end, Fraps was used for the minimum, maximum, and average frame performance numbers you will see at the end of this video, but it was not used to record the video you're watching. Instead, an external Elgato HD60 Pro hardware capture card was used. No performance loss for recording the video because the computers don't even know they're being recorded. The numbers in green at the top left corner of the screen are from MSI Afterburner, a free program you can download and use to see real-time performance of your computer and your game and your system memory. First up, we have minimum detail settings with dynamic render resolution on the $200 HP 14-inch notebook. What you are watching right now is not a result I'm going to show you at the end. The performance is dreadful. Yes, when nothing's going on, it does 35 to 40 frames per second, but with the render resolution set to dynamic, the performance is pretty bad. I will tell you that the average frame rate here is really not playable. Yes, I got away with it. Yes, I actually managed to hit the enemy a few times, but it's pretty bad. Now, we are on a map with a lot of foliage, and it's worth noting that the maps are not the same in all of these videos, so that does have an effect. But it's an attempt to give a representative example of what to expect, since after all, you can't control the maps that you play on. But with all those trees and all that foliage, notice that when I zoom in, the frame rate drops below 20 frames per second. So I'm going to cut this here and we're going to switch to the 60% render resolution video. I played several battles on each laptop playing on different maps, and yes, the performance on different maps does vary. However, at the end of this video, the results are reflective of general overall performance. I feel very comfortable with that. Now, I've switched the render resolution to 60%. What that means is that the game is internally only rendering 60% of 1080p resolution. So when you look at these images, it should be blockier, not as sharp, and it really wasn't. The visual quality difference is in fact noticeable. However, the frame rate is much improved. So if you really want to play World of Tanks and you want to do so on a very basic $200 laptop and you want playable performance, yes, you actually have to set it to these kind of settings. Now, an alternative option would be to lower the resolution to say 720p or 768p, which is fine. You could do that as well, but then the interface isn't as sharp. By setting it to 60% render resolution, you keep your 1080p output, you keep your interface sharp, the game itself is not as sharp, so it's kind of effectively the same thing. Take a look at the numbers in the upper left-hand corner of the screen. The first line is our graphics chip, the AMD GPU. We are using basically all of it, except for moments where it drops because the CPU becomes a limitation. We are mostly graphics card limited here, however, the CPU is pretty weak as well. Now, the graphics memory that we're using is over 500 megabytes. Why is that important? Because we only have 512 megabytes dedicated for this video card, and so any overflow goes to main system RAM. Not that it matters because it's main system RAM anyway, so it kind of really doesn't matter. but it is a bit of a limitation when playing a game like World of Tanks. The third line, AMD CPU, that is our 4-core processor. Now this computer does in fact have a real 4-core processor. However, they're fairly weak processing cores with a max of 1.8 gigahertz, and even those are pretty weak in and of themselves. World of Tanks does not really use 4 cores. We're using 2 of them, which is why you can see we're at about 50% or so of our CPU usage. Any jump above 50% is simply MSI Afterburner, Fraps, etc. that is keeping track of our frame rate and doing polling. Those are background tasks. So World of Tanks is only using 2 cores. Main system RAM is not an issue. Now, I mentioned at the beginning of this video that the 2 Acer laptops have been upgraded. That's not going to affect the performance that you're going to see in this video because, look at this, we're only using 2 gigabytes of our system RAM. So system RAM usage is not really an issue. It will be higher in the other videos because the detail settings are higher, and so there's more textures and more information loaded, but it's just not an issue. The real-time frame rate, you can see we are currently about 45 to 50 frames per second in most of this. It will drop and dip as action takes place, as you zoom in on tanks, as there's foliage. It is very smooth. I will tell you that this was very, very playable. I didn't have any control issues whatsoever. So if the question is, will World of Tanks play smoothly on a $200 laptop computer? Yes, it will. You have to be willing to turn the detail down to minimum. You have to be willing to set the render resolution to 60% and deal with the image that you see in front of you. But it is in fact playable, and you could play all day long if you really wanted to. So having said that, how will this game look and perform on a $400 laptop? Now what I'm going to show you is the $350 Acer Aspire laptop with the Intel HD 60 integrated graphics chip set to low detail settings at 60% render resolution. Key point, very important, while the render resolution is the same, the detail settings are not. The jump from minimum to low does increase the overall world detail, the model detail, etc. So we have actually changed our base detail resolution, even if the render resolution has not in fact changed. Now, the reason I'm showing you this is to show you something comparable to what you just watched. This is a $350 laptop that has been upgraded to 12 gigabytes of system RAM. Now, the 12 gigabytes is not going to be an issue. Take a look at our RAM usage at the top, 3.3 gigabytes. So the fact that it's got 12 gigs of RAM is not making this game any faster. It's just what happened to be in the machine. However, that does make it a $400 laptop. So you could leave the RAM out and make it a 350 if you wanted to. Incidentally, my actual recommendation is to put a 4 gigabyte stick into this machine, making it an 8 gigabyte machine, because that's about $25 to $30. So if you want to upgrade it, I would take it to 8, not 12. I think 12 is a bit overkill for this. But moving on from that, we're at almost 100 frames per second. Overnight, there's 100, there's 90, there's 100, there's 108 frames a second. We are one detail notch higher, same render resolution, and we are double plus the performance. This is the difference between being on a bottom of the barrel $200 very, very entry level laptop and being on something a little bit more modern and a little bit faster. This is not, however, the result that I'm going to show you at the end of this video. This is low detail settings again, but instead we're on dynamic render resolution. It is a much, much prettier game when you let the render resolution scale with performance. Now, the frame rate will not be as high, but take a look. We're at about 60 frames per second. Now, it'll dip down into the 50s and even into the high 40s at times, but it will also be above 60 frames per second at times. With the higher resolution comes slightly higher main system RAM usage, but we're still at about 3.6, 3.7 gigabytes. It will run on the base 4 gigabyte RAM configuration this $350 laptop comes in. However, that being said, it would run better on 8. There'd be less hard drive swapping. It would be a little bit better. So I recommend 8, but it will run on 4. Taking a look at the usage of our CPU and our GPU, the HD 620 is not even 100% used. Why? We are in fact CPU limited here. The HD 620 is actually a really good integrated graphics chip. Now, it's not the best in the world. It's still a basic entry-level integrated graphics chip, but it's much better than the AMD R2 graphics in the HP laptop. So we're using 75 to 80% of our graphics chip using about half a gigabyte of graphics memory, just 570, 580 megabytes. And our i3 CPU is using 2 of its cores. Now, if you see it at 50% and you go, wait a minute, this is a 4-core processor. Remember, it's a hyper-threaded processor, so 2 cores, but 4 threads. So Windows sees it as a 4-thread or 4-core chip, even though it's not really. Windows knows it's a hyper-threaded chip. The 2 processing cores represents 50% usage. 100% usage would actually mean that it wants 4 true processing cores. Our temperature is 68 degrees, which is warm, but totally manageable and well within its normal limits. Look at our real-time frame rate. Firing, running over these trees, going between buildings in a dense environment, we're still in the 50-ish frames per second range. Higher detail settings, higher render resolution than the $200 HP 14 laptop, better performance. This was absolutely totally playable. It's not the prettiest game on earth, but it is completely 100% playable. There's no issues whatsoever, and it looks reasonably decent even at low detail settings. So if you have $350 to $400 to spend on a laptop computer and you want to play games such as World of Tanks, here you go. Acer Aspire E15 laptop computer comes with a 1 terabyte hard drive, a nice 7th generation Kaby Lake processor, and it plays here at 50 to 60 frames per second just fine. So what happens if you want to spend a little bit more money to get a bunch more performance? This is the $550 version of this laptop. It comes with a solid state drive instead of a hard drive. It comes with 8 gigabytes of RAM instead of 4, and it comes with NVIDIA's GT 940MX dedicated gaming graphics card. This is the 512 shader version of the 940MX with a 64-bit memory bus. Why do I even mention that? Several people have asked me in previous videos. It's actually a really good $500 gaming laptop. Well, it's not a dedicated gaming laptop, but it does pretty well. This footage that I'm showing you right here is medium detail at 100% render resolution. It's actually quite playable. It is not, however, 60 frames per second smooth. I'll show you that in a second. But with all this foliage and all these tanks in close proximity, it's remarkable at how well this plays on a $500-ish laptop with a basic entry-level dedicated card such as the 940MX. Look at that frame rate. We're at 43, 44 frames, 40, almost 50 frames per second. Medium detail, 100% render resolution, and we are doing quite well. Now this card has 2 gigabytes of dedicated VRAM, and it makes a difference. Take a look, we're using 766 megabytes of it. Our CPU usage is strong, our GPU usage is 100%. Our main system RAM usage, however, is only 3.2 gigabytes, so I have upgraded this machine to 16 gigabytes of RAM, but that makes absolutely zero difference to performance whatsoever. The 8 gigs it comes with would be plenty. I am now switching you to the replay that I actually am going to show you the numbers for at the end of this video. I put it to low detail, but forced it to 100% render resolution. This is different than dynamic adjustment. With dynamic adjustment, the game can dynamically scale the resolution to maintain a frame rate. When it's set to 100% forced, it runs at full resolution regardless of the detail settings. Another difference between these laptops is the processor. This has the i5 6200U processor, a 2-core, 4-thread processor. Now, even though it has an i5 in front of the name, it actually is the same chip as the previous one with the i3 7100. They're both 2-core, 4-thread processors. They're both 15-watt processors. The only difference is the i3 chip is a 7th generation and the i5 chip is a 6th generation. What does that mean for performance? Nothing. There really is no difference there. But the clock speed, however, does make a difference. The i3 7100U is a fixed 2.4 gigahertz. The i5 6200U is 2.3 gigahertz based with a turbo boost of up to 2.8. Effectively, this means that this particular i5 is up to 15% faster due to clock speed. In reality, because it's not going to hit 2.8 all of the time, especially when multiple cores in use, They're effectively the same speed processor. I would consider these two machines interchangeable when it comes to the CPU performance. But it is the graphics card where they differ. The $350 machine uses the integrated Intel graphics, the ones that come on the Intel chip, the HD620. This laptop has an actual, real, honest-to-goodness dedicated graphics chip called the GT940MX. It is a relatively basic chip, but it is a real graphics chip with real dedicated VRAM, in this case 2 gigabytes of GDDR5 dedicated VRAM. Now, we're not using it all here. You notice that compared to the medium detail settings, our VRAM usage dropped down to 482 megabytes. Less detail, less VRAM being used. However, notice that our GPU is not getting 100% usage, but our CPU is also not getting 50% usage, which would be double cores. We're actually engine limited here, I guess. We're at 120 frames per second, give or take. Now, the average when we played a match on medium detail with all that grass was actually 47 frames per second, which is why I didn't use that result. 47, and it was a minimum in the 20s. So medium is a bit too much. Low might almost not be enough detail. So you could, for example, set medium and then turn down a couple of the settings if you wanted to, or set low and then set a few of the details up, because what we're really straddling here is mid-40s average at medium, and we're going to be north of 100 frames a second on low. So play around with the presets, play around with individual settings if you'd like to get a slightly better looking game, but needless to say, this plays to absolute perfection. I said at the beginning of this video it was not meant to be an apples to apples comparison, and it's not. This is instead a comparison of a $200-ish laptop to the $350 and $550 versions of the Acer Aspire E15. What do you get for the extra money? Does the performance really ramp up? For games, for World of Tanks, yes it definitely does, and I want to show that. Now, some of you may be saying, well, of course you get more performance for more money. That's how it's supposed to work. Wait, hang on. No, it doesn't. Not always, and that's the trick. I promise you there are $800 to $1,000 laptops that are slower in World of Tanks than this $550 Acer Aspire E15 you're watching right here. If it doesn't have a dedicated graphics chip, if it's a thin and light, there's different design goals and objectives to different laptops. So if you're looking at, for example, an Asus ZenBook that does not have a dedicated graphics chip, some of those are $1,000, but they will not perform as well as this. So you have to look at the particulars of each computer. How well is each machine going to run? What hardware does it come with? What graphics chip does it come with? It is not as simple as just looking at the price and assuming that spending more gets you more. Now, that's enough of this. Let's go look at the results. And here we are at the results. First thing I'd like to point out, these three computers will all run at different detail settings. Minimum detail 60% render on the $200 HP 14, low detail dynamic render on the $350 machine, and then low detail with 100% render resolution on the $550 machine. Again, not an apples to apples comparison. Take a look at the performance numbers, an average of 41 to 58 to 116, a minimum of 20 to 28 to 100, and a max of 57 to 86 to 120. Every number got larger with an increase in detail, but again, an increase in money. This is designed to give you an idea of what you'll get for the money, how much to spend, how much can you turn up the detail, and what performance to expect. 3 different price points, 3 different laptops. I definitely hope this has been interesting and informative. Like this video if you like it, share it with your friends if you love it. Remember to subscribe to my channel using the big huge red button directly below this video. Questions and comments in the comment section, and as always, check out my video description. Links to Amazon to all 3 of these laptops. Go check them out. I'd greatly appreciate it. Links to my 3 playlists of videos. I've done many videos on these 3 laptops. You can get far more details and lots of game performance videos, unboxings, Windows performance review, first boot setup. On these computers will be in those playlists in the video description below. Thank you so much for watching. I will see all of you next time.